Welcome everyone to Caleb Watches Movies, the channel where I, Caleb, randomly select from one of the many movies that I own. I watch and review them for you, especially on days like today where I take a certain franchise and I rank the crap out of it. And it's a brand new year. Welcome everyone to 2024. I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to be doing on this channel this year. Hopefully maybe doing some new things on here. Maybe do a couple of lives, maybe do a couple of different movie watch-alongs or movie reviews or things like that. And I am going to be taking some time off in January, actually the entire month, so if you are looking for those reviews from me in the month of January, you're not going to be getting them. This is the only thing I'm going to be releasing in the month of January this year, so I apologize, but I've been going hard with this channel since 2017, non-stop actually. I've never taken a break, so I thought, this year I'm going to start off by taking a little vacation. So you get my little ranking of the DC Extended Universe, and hopefully that satisfies you for the entire month of January. And I wanted this to kick off the year 2024 because as of today, the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe, is no more. It is done. Now we've moved into the universe of the DCU with James Gunn and Peter Safran. So since we're going into that chapter, I thought it would be nice to go back and look at the entire franchise that was the DCEU and talk about my ranking of all of those films, which ones I prefer, which ones were definitely misses, and talk about what the hell happened here. Basically, studio executives wanted to have the MCU, like, in their back pocket. They wanted their own MCU, and when certain filmmakers like a Patty Jenkins or a Zack Snyder wanted to do certain things, they were like, no, we want this from Marvel. Can't you just do that? And because they were doing something a little different, studios were like, no, we're going to pull the plug on those, and we're going to do these other things, and then things aren't going to make sense, things are not going to be clicking, and then no one's going to catch on, and no one's going to care about this franchise. So I'll give my overall thoughts on this entire franchise when I'm done with my ranking, but I did want to look back at all of the projects that were released in the DCEU since 2023. It's been 10 years, and there have been 16 films that were released by Warner Brothers in the DCEU, which, by the way, has never officially been branded the DCEU. I know fans call it the DCEU, the Extended Universe, but it's never been officially dubbed that by executives and by the film studio. But if you compare the DCEU and the MCU in their first 10 years, the MCU released 20 films in their first 10 years, and in the DCEU, they released 16 in the 10 years. So it's actually not that bad. They were pretty on pace with them. Now, in terms of continuity and story and things building to something, the DCEU absolutely failed on that. But let's talk about all of the lows and eventually all of the beautiful, wonderful highs, in my opinion, that this franchise had, starting off with number 16 of my ranking of the DCEU. I struggled with putting this film at the bottom of the list because I thought maybe there were some things about it that did click for me, but after the recent watch-along that I did on my channel of this film definitely deserves to be at the bottom of the list of the DCEU because it almost undid everything that the first entry of this character's film had, and that was Wonder Woman 1984. This film missed the mark on so many things. The first aspect is bringing Steve Trevor back. I'm totally okay if they would have brought Steve Trevor back as Steve Trevor, but they made the decision to put the consciousness of Steve Trevor into someone else's body and have Diana know that it's someone else's body, but because she can see Steve Trevor as that person, she falls back in love with him and uses him for, things. And I thought it was a strange script device of getting Steve Trevor back. If you want to bring Steve Trevor back because that's what Diana wishes for, then just bring Steve Trevor back. It would have made the moment where she has to recant her wish that much more impactful and that much more emotional because it is actually Steve Trevor leaving. But because it's not actually Steve Trevor, it's just an illusion, it has no effect when she has to recant it. Plus, the pacing of this movie is such a trudge. It is very boring in the beginning. We get unnecessary scenes that we're looking at styles from the 80s. Why the sequel is set before the events of other sequels that Wonder Woman has been in, I have no idea. Kristen Wiig as Cheetah just doesn't work. But I absolutely love the score of Hans Zimmer for this film, and I absolutely love the flying scenes of Wonder Woman. This film does have some good aspects to it. But Hans Zimmer is the creator of the Wonder Woman theme, the da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, and we don't get that theme in this movie. Like, dude, you created it. It's Wonder Woman's theme. Why didn't you put it in the score? Wonder Woman 84 is definitely the most confusing entry of this entire franchise, why it was released and why things were greenlit for this story. It baffles me, because the first one to me is so magnificent. To have this be its sequel and be connected in some way kind of insults me as a fan, and I never want to think about this movie again. And number 15 is a movie that was at the bottom of my list for a very long time, but you know what? I actually do like the squad that we have in here. I love the cast that we have. I just don't like the movie that this squad is in, and that is, of course, the original Suicide Squad. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, Will Smith as Deadshot are all fantastic casting. In particular, Margot Robbie, who went on to do other projects in the DCU as Harley Quinn. She is wonderful. And Jared Leto as the Joker, I think, is very inspiring. I just wish he would have had a chance to dive into the character more and to showcase that character more. But I'm sure all of you out there know that this film was cut and repurposed and re-edited like crazy due to the backlash that Batman v Superman got. Warner Brothers panicked, and then they hired this trailer company to say, hey, come in and can you cut this movie to make it look flashy and make it look cool and make it look more like Marvel and make it look more fun? I'm shocked that we have not gotten the director's cut of this film announced. I thought for sure after Warner Brothers okayed Zack Snyder's Justice League for HBO Max, I thought for sure within a year of that film coming out that we would have gotten an announcement that David Ayer's Suicide Squad was going to be the next project that was going to be finished and released on Max. And maybe eventually it will be, but up until now we only have this version that I can go off of, and it's just not good. It's kind of a mess. Up next is a movie that Dwayne Johnson has fought so long to make, and at points you were like, no, this film's not happening. Even though they cast Dwayne Johnson as this role, it's not gonna happen, because it's been, what, 7-8 years since he's been cast in this role? Oh no, the film's actually coming out? Okay. Well, here we go with Black Adam. From a production standpoint, I think this film is killer. Costume design of everything, the costume design of the Justice Society of America is wonderful. Atom Smasher, Cyclone, Hawkman is freaking fantastic. And the best part of the entire movie, Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate, it's just magnificent. I love that performance. Sadly, I think the weakest point of this movie is actually the guy whose face is all over the thing, and that's Dwayne Johnson. I don't feel like he's actually Black Adam in this movie. I feel, again, he's The Rock. He's Dwayne Johnson playing the part of Black Adam, but he's not actually Black Adam in this movie. And there's a whole bunch of controversy that Dwayne Johnson held up the Justice Society members as a cameo in Shazam 2. So, like, I don't know what power he had over this character and over this property for him to do that, but I think it was all a detriment to the rest of the DCEU. We do get a lovely cameo of Henry Cavill back as Superman, which was very inspiring and very uplifting for a couple of weeks up until Peter Safran and James Gunn were hired, and they were like, no, we're not going with him as Superman. I know the former executives did, but no, we're not doing that here. Another example of this entire franchise just ended up being an entire mess with all of these different heads of studios with different ideas of what they want to do with these properties, and this movie being one of them, because it had its own idea, and then a couple of weeks later, no, those ideas we're not doing, so this film, kind of pointless. Next up on the list is the last and most latest entry in the DCEU, a film that was kind of just tacked on at the end because they were in the middle of production when new studio heads were coming in and changing things around, but we still want to get this movie out. That was Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Jason Momoa returns as Aquaman, and of course Jason Momoa is just badass. He's such a cool guy, and he has such a great energy about him, and whenever he's on screen, it's a delight to watch. And I think Aquaman's chemistry with Orm in this film is fantastic. It's a nice little buddy cop film almost, where they're partnering up, they're rekindling their relationship, they're becoming friends again, and we get some awesome fight sequences in here, very much like what we did with the original Aquaman film. But that's kind of where the detriment to this film ends up being for me, is that it's very much like the first entry. I don't feel like we progressed enough to warrant this sequel. We kind of just stayed the same. Slight character improvements here and there, but overall, it kind of felt like a rinse and repeat from the original Aquaman film. Next up on the list is a film that actually I really like, but I'm sad that it's so low on the list. I felt like it should have been higher, but all the other films I do feel were better than this one. And it's a sequel to a character's film that no one went to see. I went to go see it, and I had a great time watching it, other than the stupid kids who wouldn't shut up in the theater. My god, one of the worst movie-going experiences I've ever had. And this is Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I like the progression of these characters. I love the progression of this family who are doing superhero things, but, you know, they're also kids turning into teenagers, soon to be turning into adults wanting to go off and do their own thing. So to see Billy try to keep this Shazamily together, it's actually a very heartbreaking thing to watch. And then the inclusion of the Daughters of Atlas coming in, putting a dome around the city of Philadelphia, why we didn't have other Justice League members coming by to help out, I don't know, but, you know, again, with this franchise, you don't ask those questions. But I do enjoy this cast, and I enjoy this ensemble. I like the improvements that we have with the costuming. They took away the hoods. I was never really a hood guy for Shazam. I like just the straight up cape, and the new design of the lightning bolt on his chest I think is great. It's another character franchise that I wish would continue, but as of this point, I don't think it's gonna in the new DCU. Up next is the first entry of Jason Momoa's solo outings as Aquaman. And it's a very groundbreaking film. We don't get films like Wakanda Forever. We don't get films like Avatar, The Way of Water without movies like this coming out. The technology of these characters and these actors being underwater, the hair choreography of the hair just kind of waving in the water, I think is wonderful. The visual effects here are some of the best you would ever see in any film. And yes, they're underwater. They're fucking underwater. You gotta give it that. So the fact that this film wasn't nominated for Best Visual Effects at that year's Oscars is very, very insulting. I know James Wan was very upset about it. But it's a fun action-adventure film. Jason Momoa doing his Jason Momoa badass stuff. Amber Heard looking as gorgeous as hell. And Willem Dafoe looking old and looking creepishly young in the movie. It's all a lot of fun. And to have Jason Momoa come out in the classic Aquaman costume with the orange and the green, just a look that just clashes, you know? Like, it looks good on the page, but you think it in real life, you're like, that's gonna look stupid. But then you put it on someone like Jason Momoa and you go, no, that's freaking badass. All of the underwater fight scenes, everything in here, I think are enjoyable. I love going back and watching this movie every once in a while. At number 10 is our first introduction to Shazam in the mainstream media, and I love this foster film. This orphan who's looking for his mother, who was abandoned by her when he was a little kid, realizing that family is not by blood. You actually get to choose your family in this life, and that's something that I believe in very heartfelt in my life. Your family is not who you were born into. It's not who you share blood with. Your family is who you choose to love and you let into your life. So this movie resonated me tremendously, and I think Zachary Levi in the lead role as Shazam is great. I just don't think that his performance matched what Asher Angel was doing as Billy Batson in kid form. These are two different versions of Billy Batson that never clicked. But Mark Strong as the villain of this film, you can't get a better actor to be your villain in a movie. And then the whole surprise of the Shazamily at the end, I thought was great. This is one of the best entries of the DCEU. At number 9 is one of the newest entries in the DCEU that came out earlier this year. It was actually meant to just go directly to streaming on Max, but they said, no, let's actually put out in theaters. Wish they would have done that with some other projects in the DCEU, damn it. But this film turned out to be a lot of fun and a great introduction to this character that supposedly is carrying on in the DCU. I don't know how, but it is. And that's Blue Beetle. A great introduction to this character and a great ensemble cast that I hope are also going along into the new DCU, but it's a nice solid origin story to Reyes, and it makes you care about him, it makes you care about his family. A super relatable dude who gets the powers of a superhero in the Scarab. That's something I also loved about this movie. Everyone saying the word Scarab as if they have a speech impediment that goes, huh, whenever you say Scarab. The villain, though, is very forgettable. I always called him CarMax, but I know that's a car shopping online site, but I'm pretty sure it's similar to that, so I've always just called him CarMax, but I couldn't really tell you, like, what his motivation was. Probably something with his daughter, right? It was something with his family? I don't know. Who cares? And then Susan Sarandon shows up, because she's a name. Not really. Blue Beetle, I actually really enjoyed, and I'm very excited that this character, this version of this character, is moving on in the DCU. And number 8 is one of the most fun movie-going experiences that I've had. It was actually the last movie that I went to go see before everything shut down in 2020 due to the pandemic, but that is Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. This movie proved to be that Margot Robbie, as an actress, is one of the smartest business people in Hollywood today. She produced this thing, she got this thing off the ground, she got an all-woman behind-the-scenes cast for it, a woman screenwriter, a woman director, everyone. It's wonderful. And I love this as a little side mission for Harley Quinn, this character who is one of the most popular characters in the entire DC overall universe, in comics and video games and TV shows and now in film. And she's great. She's wonderful. Margot Robbie is one of the shining stars of this entire franchise. But one of the unsung heroes who is in this movie that no one talks about but I absolutely loved was Ewan McGregor as Black Mask. This germaphobe mobster who is so vicious. He's merciful, but if you cross him in any way, he will just skin you alive. Ew. Ew. Is that a snot bubble? Ew. Why does she have a crossbow? God, that's so freaking awesome. I want a crossbow. Margot Robbie is the best thing about this movie. Ewan McGregor, though, is a close second. Black Canary, Huntress, I think are great in here. The only aspect of this film that was questionable for me was this version of Cassandra Cain. It was not Cassandra Cain, I'm sorry. Cassandra Cain is a mute assassin who goes around and eventually becomes the new Batgirl. This version of Cassandra Cain is not that, but that's just a small nitpick. I absolutely love this film, and it is a fantastic watch whenever you go back to see it. At number 7, I am putting what many people have pointed to as kind of like the first downfall or the first trip that the DCEU had in establishing itself, and that is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this movie, and I will defend this movie to the death every single time someone brings it up. And you know what? This film is constantly brought up. It came out in 2016. It is still talked about today, whether good or bad. This film is still in the superhero mainstream conversation. And I think this movie is ahead of its time. I think it was a brilliant take and a brilliant way of introducing new characters in this franchise, going against the grain of what the MCU was doing, where each new character had their own solo picture that led up to a team-up movie, an Avengers movie. Here, we're kind of throwing everything right away into the mix. People were saying, oh, we should have gotten a Man of Steel sequel before we got Batman v Superman. This is a Man of Steel sequel. This is a continuation of the events that happened in Man of Steel. Now we're just introducing all the people that were affected by it. In particular, Bruce Wayne as Batman. And Ben Affleck is perfect as Batman. It's debatable for me if I'm going to put him as the best, because Christian Bale is just so near and dear to my heart, and those films are so near and dear to my heart, but gosh damn, Ben Affleck as Batman is freaking perfect. That whole warehouse scene with him fighting is the best Batman action scene that has ever been produced on screen. And then, of course, we get to the whole Batman v Superman fight, which I actually think lasted a perfect amount of time, and ended in one of the most controversial ways you could imagine. Batman realizes that Superman's mom's name is the same as his mom's name, and that makes them the same and equal and brothers, which I personally absolutely love, because this man is so filled with rage and has placed all of his anger and hatred of the world onto this one man. But then for him to realize that this one man, this thing that I'm looking at, that I'm placing all of this blame on and this hatred on, I'm realizing that this is actually a man, and it's not a thing. He is a man, he is not an alien, he is a person, and that person has a mom, right? Comes from a mother. If I do this, a mother is going to lose her son tonight. And me, as Batman, I know the pain that that could cause, that loss, that life is taken away from one of your loved ones, and I'm not going to do that again. I think is an absolute beautiful way to end a fight, and to spark the friendship that these two would eventually have. Personally, I think that's beautiful. Many other people didn't agree with it. But it's a movie that wasn't well received by the majority of people as the studios wanted it to be, and because it wasn't, they started panicking. And thank God Zack Snyder started shooting Justice League a couple of weeks after this film was released. If they were going to wait a couple of months, Zack Snyder would have been fired long before he eventually was. But Batman v Superman is an excellent film that is still ahead of its time. It is very innovative, and I thought was a great next step in leading us to a Justice League film, just not everyone agreed with me at the time. At number 6 is a film that didn't do well in the box office because, you know what, the pandemic was still going on, people. Everyone brings up this film's box office and say, oh, people didn't go to see that movie, and they put this guy as the lead of the whole DCU. What are they doing? When The Suicide Squad was released, it was released in theaters, but also on HBO Max, where you could watch it in the comfort and safety of your own home during a COVID pandemic. So yeah, it was not going to do well in the box office. It never was going to. That doesn't mean that this film is any less excellent, because this movie freaking is. It's a movie that I could put on and watch and rewatch and rewatch and rewatch. The writing here is stellar. The casting of these actors in these roles is freaking perfect. It's our first indication of John Cena as Peacemaker. That is one of the best castings ever. Idris Elba as Bloodsport, which is basically the same as Will Smith as Deadshot, but you know, Will Smith didn't want to do it, which rightfully so after the first one. But the story here is wonderful. The pacing here is excellent. The writing, the script, the dialogue, just the casual dialogue between all these characters is freaking awesome. I love this movie. And if you sit back and actually watch it and listen to the dialogue and look at how perfect everything lines up and the flow that this film has, James Gunn, who made this film, if he adds those sensibilities to crafting the entire new DCU with multiple chapters, this first one that we're getting, the Gods and Monsters chapter, if he puts the same sensibilities that he put in the Suicide Squad to the entire franchise, we're in for a fucking treat over the next couple of years. The Suicide Squad, one of my favorite entries in this entire franchise, and from here on out, it's just all sunshine and rainbows in my opinion. I love all of these projects that we're going to talk about here at the top of this list. This movie is just fun, and when I watch films, that's the main thing I want. I just want to have fun. This film is absolutely great. At number 5 is a film that came out earlier this year that absolutely deserved to do much better at the box office than what it ended up doing. A major box office bomb, but that doesn't mean that this film is any less great. In my opinion, The Flash is at number 5. And probably the reason why this film didn't do so well, 2 reasons. One, from a toxic fan base that was just boycotting and going against and hating on everything that this film produced just because it wasn't a certain thing. But the second reason why this film didn't do so well is because Ezra Miller and all of their personal stuff that was happening in real life, which is an absolute shame because they are the best part of this movie. Their performance as both characters' renditions of Barry Allen is heartbreaking. It is hilarious in some points. It's a beautiful, dramatic performance. And when Barry meets his mother at the end of the film one last time, where he has to make the decision to essentially kill her, that scene gets me every single time. I've gone back to watch this film so many times since it came out earlier this year. It's such a wonderful movie experience. And that moment at the end is just so heartfelt. I cry every time I see it. It's a beautiful scene. Michael Keaton coming back as Batman is awesome. He said he would never do that without Tim Burton, and here we go. We get him here for this film, and he's awesome. Even though his character really does nothing in the final battle scene with Zod and everything. Really, he's just there to get the Flash in to save Sasha Calle's Supergirl, who is also fantastic. I really hope she continues on as Supergirl in the DCU. Probably not though, so we just go back and we watch her in this film and just think about the good old days when she was Supergirl. And it's a nice swan song for Ben Affleck as Batman. His last little short monologue talking to Barry about how doesn't need to live his past, needs to live his life. It's a great way for him to go out, and how he just says that line, maybe next time. It's a perfect way to end that rendition of that character. We'll never see him again. Well, should never say never, but as of now, we're not seeing him again as Batman, and it's a great way to go out. I felt had great CGI. The whole concept behind the Chronoball and how they dealt with time travel and how they dealt with controlling time, I thought was very brilliant. When he was in the Speed Force and when he was moving fast, yes, things seemed off, but to me, as an audience viewing member, I thought that was a stylistic choice, and then the director confirmed that later on, and I was totally okay with it. So many people looking at it like, oh my god, that's fake. Oh my god, look at that CGI, it's so fake. It's a movie where a guy is moving faster than the speed of light. things are going to look fake. The Flash is one of my favorite movie-going experiences I've ever had because it was just so much fun, and it deserves to be towards the top of this list. At number 4, though, is one of my favorite TV shows that I have ever watched. Definitely one of my favorite superhero TV shows of all time. And that is John Cena in the title role of Peacemaker. So many DCEU fans hated this TV show for some ungodly reason. I thought this TV show was so hilarious. John Cena is great in this role. He has great comedic timing, but he also has a great dramatic presence about him. There are moments where Peacemaker just breaks down in tears or becomes absolutely vulnerable, and it's a beautiful thing to see, especially from a professional wrestler turned actor in John Cena. He plays the fucking piano in this show. Like, what? Where did that come from? The pacing of this show is great. The cliffhangers of this show is fantastic. The dialogue in here, which I think a lot of people had issues with because it's all just fart jokes. And they're all just saying fuck every other word. Gosh, I hate this TV show so much. From what I've discovered, a lot of haters out there of this TV show just saw clips of this show and never actually sat down to actually watch the entire thing. They just got a clip off of YouTube or Twitter randomly. And they were like, oh god, that's not my type of scene. I'm not watching this show. This show's terrible. If you would sit down and actually watch this TV show, you would realize that this show is fantastic, and it's perfect, and it's one of the best of the DCEU. Here we are moving into the top 3. You can kind of get a sense of where this list is going. Here at number 3, I think is a masterpiece of a movie. Our first introduction to the DCEU was the introduction of the brand new Superman with Henry Cavill in the movie Man of Steel. The production design, the cinematography, the CGI here is brilliant, and it's masterful. And I love how they handled the introduction of this version of Superman. 1978's Superman the movie is one of the most important superhero films of all time, but it's one of the most detrimental superhero films of all time because this character of Superman will forever be compared to Christopher Reeve's Superman. That film came out in the golden age of comics where everything was, look, up in the sky, oh, I'm going to save that cat from that tree. A lot of flat character developments and a lot of flat story arcs that seemed like too good to be true. Zack Snyder took a realistic approach to the idea of what would happen if an alien like Superman was to be discovered here on this planet. How would people react? We would have people that would get behind him and support him, but there would be many other people, and probably a large majority of people, who would live in fear and would want some type of regulation on this person. They would ask questions. Well, if this person exists, how do we know that there's not other people like him on this planet? I'm powerless to defend myself against a superhuman being like that. And then when Zod and the rest of the Kryptonians come down and they start fighting with Superman, it's a battle between gods over a city full of just scrawny people. Right? Mortals who can't defend themselves. And that was a lot of the controversy that this film got for that final battle scene between Superman and Zod, how they were just destroying everything. Now Superman would save everybody. He wouldn't focus on fighting, he would focus on saving. He's Superman for a day. He doesn't know how to do the whole Superman thing yet. And when you have an all-powerful being who's saying, I'm going to kill every single person on this planet unless you stop me, I would rather him go after him as opposed to being passive-aggressive and focus on saving people. The best way to save people is to take out that guy. The flight scenes in here are magnificent. Sometimes I just watch them just to feel like I could fly. That's how great these are. And the cape choreography, as they called it, the CGI cape that they would use, it's just a thing of beauty here. This film is masterful. It was a great introduction, in my opinion, to the DCEU. And I wish we would have carried on with this character, but sadly we didn't. At number 2 is the reason why I started this YouTube channel. When I watched this film, I cried multiple times because it took 85 years for this part of the Trinity to get her own film and to see it play out like it did and in the manner of how it did. I thought this movie is absolute beauty, and that is Wonder Woman. There's a reason why I have a Wonder Woman tattoo on my forearm right now. It's because this movie and how it represented this character and what this character represents to the world, I thought was absolutely beautiful. The realization that Diana has in here that it's not all just black and white, that evil is in the hearts of all people. It's not just one figure that you can go after. Once you stop that, that's going to destroy all the evil in the world. No, human beings, men, are inherently good and evil. It has both parts. Ares is here. He's not doing evil things. He's just kind of whispering into people's ears. World War I was fought by humans. It was not caused by gods, it was caused by human beings. But for her to realize that and to still say it's not about what you deserve, it's about what you believe, and I believe in love, and the power of love is going to overtake the power of war, and the power of hate, and the power of anger every single time. This movie is so important to me. After I watched that film, I sat back and said, you know, I've been thinking about doing this YouTube channel for so long. That movie was wonderful. I'm finally going to do this. And I would not be here today doing this ranking video if it were not for the 2017 film Wonder Woman. It's one of my favorites. I would consider putting it in the top 10 favorite films of all time for me, but sadly it's beat out by this other film at number 1. And not sadly, because this film absolutely deserves to be at the top of the list, because the journey it took to get this film produced and released finally was such a long journey that involved a lot of outcrying and a lot of rallies and a lot of sometimes bullying of other studio directors and other studio films that had nothing to do with this franchise. But it comes down to this: the best film of this entire DCEU is Zack Snyder's Justice League, a 4-hour and 2-minute epic feature that doesn't feel 4 hours. This thing clips along like crazy, and it's a beautiful story of the coming together of all these godlike powers to take on Steppenwolf, this rock star who comes down to Earth to get a whole bunch of boxes and to take it over. You all know what happened with the theatrical cut of Justice League and how that was all chopped to bits because Zack Snyder had to leave the project in post-production because he had a tragedy in the family. His daughter committed suicide and he wanted to be there with his family. Plus, on top of that, he would constantly have people in his ear from the studio wanting this film to change because Batman v Superman wasn't received well by the general audience. And so they wanted to make it funnier, they wanted to incorporate other things, they wanted to change lines that made it sound more like a Marvel film as opposed to a DCEU film. So he finally said, okay, fuck it, I'm done with this. He took a laptop that had the entire rough cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League on it. It was all in black and white, and he took it home, and the rest is history. Joss Whedon came in, took it over, rewrote about 80 pages of dialogue, which majority of it was all crap. Not all of it, because I think the theatrical cut of Justice League is an okay film. I don't think it's the worst thing. It's definitely a Frankenstein version of a movie, though. But after all the outcry, and because of the global pandemic, because film studios weren't getting other films made, they realized, hey, we have this fan base that really wants this. We have this new streaming app, HBO Max. We need something for it to get subscribers and to get people watching it. And we basically have this film half made. We just need to do CGI and color renderings for it. So yeah, let's finally put that out. And what we get is a 4-hour epic that is absolutely 100% beautiful. I really do believe that there is a 3-hour version of this film that could have been released in 2017 for a theatrical cut. I really think so. There are some things in here that could easily be cut. There are some moments in here that may seem like a little drawn out, or maybe it's a little too much slow motion in certain parts, but I'm glad we got the 4-hour cut here because it's the grand vision of the director, and I love to hear that a director is able to have his full vision realized for the screen. And not even his full vision, because he wanted to put Green Lantern in at the very end of the movie, but he had to substitute it because the studio's like, no, we're gonna do stuff with Green Lantern, so could you use someone else? Could you use Martian Manhunter? Which is still awesome. It's still great to have him in here. But even then, they were still poking at him and being like, no, we can't do that. It is a wonderful film, and it would have led to, I think, 2 sequels that would have been just as epic and just as popular as this film was. Sadly, though, I think the vision of those 2 films was finite, and I don't think that the conclusion of where this version of Justice League and the DCU was heading wasn't leading towards something that was going to be building for something that could have been built on for years to come. It was finite. We had characters that were going to end, that were going to die, and not going to continue. So I understand the essence of wanting to do something different because you want to build this as a brand. You want to build this as something that's going to continue on for not just for 10 years, but for 50 years. So it's disappointing that we didn't get the sequels to Justice League that I wish we would have. Maybe eventually we will in a comic adaptation or an animated feature. But until that time, this is the best that we got, and Zack Snyder's Justice League is the ultimate vision of what this franchise could have and should have been. And that's my ranking of all of the DCEU projects that came out over the last 10 years. And looking back on it, I absolutely love these characters. I'm a DC guy. If you put a gun to my head and say, hey, Marvel or DC, which one do you like? I'm DC all the way. I love every single one of these characters. I know their backstories. I have read so many comics with these characters. I have them tattooed on my flesh. That's how important these characters are to me. So to see this franchise start where it did, but then not go anywhere, and to basically end and get rebooted 10 years later, the best word I can use to describe this franchise is disappointing. And it's disappointing that I had to say that, because there are some versions of these characters in here that I think are the best. I think Man of Steel is wonderful. Henry Cavill as Superman is perfect. Ben Affleck as Batman is freaking wonderful. Ray Fisher as Cyborg is the heart of this entire franchise. I have his quote, "I'm not broken and I'm not alone," written in my wife's handwriting on my flesh. That's how important that quote in that movie was to me. But to see this franchise not gain traction, and to see it being pulled and tugged between different heads of studios and executives and different directors with different visions on it, and toxic fan bases that fight over other fan bases who are just casual viewers or wanting to watch other movies, but because they're part of Warner Brothers, this toxic fan base will fight them and boycott and call them out over stupid shit. The whole thing is sadly very disappointing. And I think doing this list here in 2024, now that all of the previous films have been released in the previous regime, that chapter is ended. And this ranking video is therapeutic for me because it's allowing me a physical opportunity to close the book on this chapter of these characters. I'm always going to have these films. I can always go back and watch these films whenever I want. I can put on Justice League. I can put on Wonder Woman whenever I want to watch them. But now it's time to officially move on to the next chapter of these characters, and that's with the DCU with James Gunn and Peter Safran. James Gunn is a great story writer and a great director, and I think this franchise is in great hands. The fact that it's its own studio now and they are the heads, they're not listening to anyone else, they are creating everything, and the fact that they have a full vision as to where this franchise is going. It makes me very inspired, and it makes me very happy. That's one of the main problems that the DCEU had, is that we had no sense of where this was going. We didn't have a sense of where this was building towards. Maybe they had ideas in the background, but again, studio heads were just switching in and out and fighting with each other all the time. We never got an official slate from people. The only reason why we knew about films was because it was a discussion over a boardroom conference call. James Gunn has already come out and given us 10 projects so far that the DCU is focusing on, and that's not everything in this first chapter. He has an idea. He has a goal of where the story is going, and that makes me very happy and very inspired. So right now, I am closing the book on the DCEU for me. It's its own thing, and that part is done. We are moving on to the DCU, new versions of these characters and stories that I'm sure are going to be resonating with a wider audience, in my opinion, and hopefully it's going to lead to one of the best stories of all time. So that is my list of the entire DCEU, the frustrating DCEU. What did you think about it? What is your ranking of all of these projects in the DCU? Whatever you thought, comment below, let me know what you thought about it. And as always, if you like what you see here, if you like my take on movies, then hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that bell. See you the next time I'm releasing next movie review. So guys, I will see you next time on the channel, but in the meantime, be well, be good to each other, and go watch a movie. Take care, guys.